This is a DGC Data Governance Collaborative deep dive from MHGC on preparing for the transition to digital quality. Our speaker today is Amal Vyas from NCQA. We'll let him introduce himself in more detail in a moment. And if you'll go to the first slide, I'm just going to introduce us first, and then we'll pass over for the interesting stuff. The Massachusetts Health Data Consortium, or MHGC, was formed in 1978. We're the oldest organization of our type in the country. We convene the health data community, payers, providers, some patient advocates and patient organizations, associations, and vendors. And we focus on modernizing health data and data exchange, navigating federal and state health data regulations, empowering individuals to have their health information when and where they need it. We are locally focused, but nationally recognized, and quality measures is one of the areas that we focus on. So we're really pleased to have this talk today. If you'll go on to the next slide, this is being sponsored by our Data Governance Collaborative, which is a group that I lead at MHGC. The DGC is a one-stop interoperability resource convened to discuss, design, and implement data sharing and interoperability among payers, providers, patients, members, and other interested parties. We focus on three main areas: collaboration, where we bring all of these different groups and organizations and people into a room, virtual these days, and look to develop common understanding about data standards, what data quality is, data exchange mechanisms, and what it means to participate in modern health IT. We also bring a lot of education to our members. We help them understand regulatory obligations, data and exchange standards they're expected to use, and modern technology and related processes. And finally, we pride ourselves on being the innovation engine of MHGC. We look to identify and develop projects and services that are needed to make modern health data practices and exchange a reality. If you'll go to the last slide on this. So if you're interested in more information, you can visit the Data Governance Collaborative website. You can look at the collection of regulatory and legislative comments and letters that we've submitted to various parts of HHS, the FTC, OMB, and other parts of government, as well as some to NCQA for that matter. Or email me at dgc@myhealthdata.org for more information. Now on with the show, I'm going to pass things off to Amal and let him introduce himself and get us started. Are you there, Amal? Excellent. We can't hear you if you're talking.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Can you hear
now
me?
we can hear you.
That's perfectly fine. Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Is I guess the first question that I should ask.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining this conversation, and I'd like this to be exactly that, a conversation, an interactive conversation. I have a few slides to shape this interaction, but I would very much like to have a lively dialogue where we talk about how to accelerate the transformation or transition to digital quality. And I think by the combined efforts of the community and in collaboration with our federal partners, I think we can make it happen. Because I think the right signals, the right advancements and developments are in play right now. And so just to start things off, Amol Vyas, VP of Interoperability at NCQA. It's been close to 2 years for me at NCQA. Before that, I was the chief architect at Cambia Health Solutions out of the Pacific Northwest. Cambia runs one of the Blue Cross Blue Shield plans out of the Pacific Northwest, known as Regions Blue Cross Blue Shield. I started on this journey towards interoperability over at Cambia, and was fortunate or have been fortunate to have been involved with so many interop initiatives, in particular the Karen Alliance. I am the lead author of the Karen Blue Button Implementation Guide, and hoping to answer any questions around the pair perspectives on interoperability, as well as the overall, interop perspective from I guess, a digital quality focus. So, and like I said, feel free to ping or post anything in the chat. I think we have Janice monitoring the chat for any questions or comments. So, let's jump into the heart of the matter, which is why digital quality. I think most of you should understand the reasons or the reasoning behind digital quality, but just to kind of drive it home, quality right now, it is important, but has become fragmented and burdensome. And we have emerging standards and regulations that are enabling a digital transformation. They're fueling innovations in how data can be represented discreetly, and I think that's something that is raising the question, can we move towards digital quality? Is this the right time? We also have a demand signal from the point of view of care delivery and a learning health system. Can we have a quality perspective that is better aligned with care delivery and learning health system? And at the same time, the focus is also, we talked about fragmentation and burden. How can we reduce the burden, the costs, create more relevant measures, and ultimately result in better care and outcomes? And so I think this is connecting the dots in my mind, reducing the burden and the cost, having the right set of measure definitions or measure concepts, and focusing more on the better care and outcomes. So why now? As we talked about it, the feedback from the industry is around reducing the measure burden, and kind of aligning more with the learning health system kind of model, and supporting the market move towards value-based care. We also have the maturity of standards, which is happening at the right time. We have the federal government doubling down on interoperability standards, both on the payer side and also on the clinical side. And I might also add on the infrastructure side as well. We have advances in infrastructure networks where the standardization might be actually not just possible, but perhaps scalable also. And then there is this shift towards value-based care that is driving the priorities and greater need for accountability and measurement at perhaps all levels and contexts of healthcare. And so we want deeper insights into how care is given and really evaluated from a quality perspective. And I think the digital measurement or digital measures are the right tools to achieve that. So how do we do the transition to digital quality, and what does that look like really? A simple kind of perspective would be we move from paper to software. Right now, most of the quality programs that we have started from paper. It's a PDF document. It's a paper document that basically documents the quality measure logic and the parameters and the specific categories therein. The move to digital basically means moving from paper to software. How can we move the content that is in the paper PDFs to their software definitions? And do we have the right vehicle to move to software? So that's something that kind of goes into this consideration, when you transition to digital quality. And you also want to look at, lowering the cost and burden and more importantly, the variability of interpreting the paper-based content, right? And so going to a more discrete digital representation uh, in my mind reduces the cost and burden, but also reduces the variability that might exist in terms of interpreting and implementing the measure requirements and the execution. And so this paper-do software it definitely facilitates the transition to digital quality. Then you have the need to support, like I said, a full learning health system and the use cases associated with that. Some might say quality reporting is the golden business use case, and yes, in my mind it is. But there's also other quality related use cases that can be unlocked by going to digital. And this has to do with the way quality can be digitalized. The quality measures can be digitalized so that with configuration, with parameterization, they could be adapted to multiple use cases. And we'll take a look at some of those use cases in a couple of slides. But the support of the full learning health system use cases is what's driving the new architecture that leverages the digitalization of quality measures. And of course, the the facilitation of doing not just quality improvement use cases, but population management and analytics. I think that's just the layer. That's the, I think, cherry on the cake, where you unlock insights and intelligence out of the data that is either passed as input to the measures, but also the data that is generated as the measure executes and the outputs that result from the measure execution. And all of this provides a way to look at different aspects of the data that is contributing to the quality.
Amal, could I interrupt you with our first question?
Please go ahead.
So John would like to know a little bit more about reducing burden and costs. He suggests that one of the biggest issues around burden and cost is the lack of standardization, and that different people make little tweaks to the standards so they're not quite the same for everyone, which
Absolutely.
I would agree with as something that is
Yes.
true. So I wondered if you had any thoughts or comments on how to combat that.
Right. And we'll look at that as to, what NCQA is doing to minimize that variability. I think what we're looking at is the variability. That variability exists with the paper-based versions of what we have right now, right? Measures. But we also have the danger of proliferation. I might say, standard proliferation, if I can spell it right. When you're not looking at standards in a reusable and a common layer or a common ground perspective. And so, yeah, you can fall into that trap. But what NCQA is doing, or the path that NCQA has adopted, I think, is one way to reduce that variability, bring harmonization within the community and the ecosystem around specific set of standards, and really document the variations as they fuel different use cases. Because I think variations are useful if they can be used towards specific use cases. But we need to have a governance, a set of rules and requirements around what constitutes good variability. So we'll touch on that. Great question, by the way. As to how to transition to digital quality, I think one of the third thing that I look at as the drivers for transitioning to digital quality is the better value-based care support. I think the value-based care support calls for quality measures that basically move beyond their current working. And we kind of touched on this before, but we need accountability and sort of monitoring at all levels of care delivery. And I think that is something that the digital quality can afford. The digitalization achieves the objective of being able to monitor for care, the quality of care, as well as generation of analytics and intelligence on the data generated from from these digital quality measures. And so I think it supports value-based care, in a way that you can build more complex use cases out of the same set of measure concepts. And I think in all, when you look at it holistically, it offers a better measurement system in the long run. Let's take a look at how the quality measures have evolved over time. We started with the paper quality measures. We talked about those, where you have data from claims, there's manual chart extraction, there's this perhaps flat files that involve manual measure coding, perhaps mapping and execution. From then on, we kind of moved towards clinical quality measures, where it involved a combination of traditional data and electronic data sources. There was still some manual coding and data collection involved, and that kind of basically moved towards ECQMs, electronic clinical quality measures, where the clinical data from EHR was the main I guess, electronic part of the quality measure data. The move towards clinical data, electronic clinical data, I think is important, because that, I think, has started the revolution around going full digital. And that's what our end state is: digital quality measures, where the data that can go into a measure as input is fully digital, regardless of the source of the data, whether it is EHRs, whether it is claims adjudication systems, immunization registries, HIEs, and so on. And it's not just electronic, it's not just digital, but it follows a standard that allows the digital, the data to be consistent, for the measures to be consistently looking at the data and producing consistent output or results.
Amal, could you
Yes.
talk to where the ECDS system fits in this progression?
Yes, I can touch on the ECDS. So ECDS system is all about reporting the output of the data. From the perspective of NCQA, the measures or the measures can accept electronic data, but the ECDS system represents the way measure output is reported. And so it looks at the end or the result part of the measure execution, if
So
that
you
makes
could use
sense.
that with any of these.
I believe the current set of measures that we have, some of them are ECDS enabled, but I will point this out that we are transitioning our ECDS measures towards full digital. The digital quality measure transition involves the digitalization of not just the measure input, but also the measure output. And we can talk about the standards that we're looking at when we get to the standards portion of our conversation. But that's the general kind of direction that we want to go towards.
Great, carry on.
All right, so the use cases, right? I mean, yes, the reporting is the golden business use case, but there's other use cases that can be unlocked using the same measure logic, but with different parameters, different configurations. And that's the power of digitalized measures and the data that is digital as well. And I'm talking about FHIR data and CQL logic being used to represent the measures. The CQL logic allows for creating common libraries that deliver common measure functionality, and these libraries can be combined and combined to create versions of measures that focus on specific use cases together with different parameters and different configurations. And so this basically unlocks, using the same concepts, different use cases that exist in the quality domain. And some of them are mentioned here, performance improvement, care gaps, payment and optimization, and so forth. Let's take a look at what we're seeing on the federal, I guess the federal, government side in terms of driving towards these standards, which to address a previous question, that look at reducing the variability out there. We had I would go before 2016 as well. I would look at the meaningful use two, where the regulation called for open APIs. And I think at that point, I see that as the start of a revolution where several EHRs that were subject to meaningful use started to implement open APIs. Some actually went ahead and created a Fire API. And if you have Apple iPhone, you have a health records connector app that utilizes those APIs. The Fire specification that corresponds to the Fire APIs used for meaningful use 2 is the Argonaut profile specification. And so right now if you have Apple iPhone, you can download your clinical data using those Argonaut Fire APIs. Fast forward to 2016, the Cures Act brought about a refresh of those APIs. It doubled down on Fire. It also expanded the data that is exposed through the EHRs. And the idea is that this data ultimately represents the HIPAA designated record set, in its final version. But it basically started off that roadmap towards, more data to be exposed through these APIs. And so the Cures Act also unlocked, I want to say the population level of APIs, or the population flavor of the APIs. And I'm talking about the G10 bulk Fire version of the Cures Act APIs. Excuse me. And so the 21st Century Cures Act started that US CDI roadmap, where the US CDI would consist of elements that would increase as it kind of progressed on the roadmap. And the APIs, the G10, whether it is single patient flavor or the population flavor, would expose the US CDI content according to how the roadmap moved. So the start of the enforcement of that roadmap was the 2020 when the CERT Fire API was introduced. So all of this was happening on the provider side, obviously. We had the CMS, largest health plan in the nation, come out with its Blue Button 2.0 API, which is a Fire-based API, in 2019. And I think that started the revolution on the payer side. It basically followed that up with CMS Patient Access API, which basically meant that the payers would be exposing adjudicated claims in the Fire format, just like what the Argonaut or the Cures Act APIs would do. So this basically kind of provided the yin to the yang, if you will, in terms of data liquidity and digitalization of data, and also standardization of data. Because what these regulations asked for is basically alignment with not just the Fire standard, but also alignment with specific Fire standards for exposing the data, and thereby reducing the variability in how the data is exposed from these covered entities. Then we had the CMS Universal Foundation, guideline under the Meaningful Measures 2.0 uh, objective, where the transition to digital measurement was the focus. Excuse me. And the idea is to basically go towards full digital by 2030. I mean, that's the roadmap that's published by CMS. NCQA is 100% aligned with that objective. And towards that, I might mention that we have converted all of our HEDIS measures to digital using CQL and FIRE as the input, CQL for the logic and FIRE as the input. And um, we want to also work with the ecosystem to make sure that this happens for other measures as well, non-HEDIS measures as well. And we'll kind of touch on that a little bit later, as to how we can achieve that. But we have taken the step towards, kind of accelerating that transition, and we are 100% aligned with CMS on that. The last thing that I'll mention in terms of federal government and standards and advancements that are happening is around the latest final CMS rule. The CMS final rule expands the specific use cases that where mandates kind of come in, namely the prior authorization, stipulating 3 implementation guides from Da Vinci project as part of the requirements for the prior authorization automation. And these standard implementation guides, again, look at reducing the variability, digitalizing the workflow there, and really reducing the burden around the topic of prior authorization. The final rule also has other components. I think to me, the major component is a population flavor of the patient access API, also known as the provider access API, where the provider can get the adjudicated claims for the set of members that are assigned to that provider. And so that basically establish a parity between the G10 single patient and population flavor, and also the CMS, single patient access API, and the population flavored provider access API. And so we're gradually seeing that both the payer and the clinical domains are kind of increasingly in lockstep to facilitate, exciting developments in digitalization, whether it is, prior authorization, whether it is consumer access to data or quality. I also don't want to, ignore the exciting developments happening on the TEFCA front. Again, there much needs to be said about how TEFCA will manifest, going forward. But the exciting thing that I think I'm looking at is the support for HEDIS measures or HEDIS reporting as a TEFCA, exchange purpose. Having this dedicated lane for HEDIS reporting, and then there's other dedicated lanes also under healthcare operations, namely quality reporting and care coordination. It facilitates innovation and standardization with respect to these specific use cases. And I think that's important because we want to clear the way for innovation and standardization, one use case at a time. That allows us to not go into boiling the whole ocean, which is a good thing, I think. But yeah, these are some of the kind of developments and exciting regulations that are happening that are fueling this move to digitalization and digital quality. This slides kind of talk about the TEFCA perspective. We all know that TEFCA is meant to be a national infrastructure that facilitates not just standardized data, but also standardized infrastructure, from a scaling perspective. And the level 2 exchange purposes that came out August of last year, I think they are in the right direction. where there is dedicated lane for specific use cases like quality reporting, care coordination, and HEDIS reporting. And so I think we definitely like the spirit. But again, to my earlier kind of comment, more needs to be done in terms of making TEFCA, a real world or a reality in the ecosystem, the current ecosystem. This slides kind of gives more details around the level 2 exchange purposes. Like I said, we have care coordination, HEDIS reporting, and the quality measure reporting based on the publication of the standard operating procedure, the responding of responding from the nodes, TEFCA nodes, to queries for care coordination, HEDIS reporting, and quality measure reporting will become mandatory from, I believe, February of 2026, if this rule is adopted and implemented. And so that kind of provides the infrastructure that will help carry the digital quality, data exchanges related to digital quality, care coordination, on this nationwide infrastructure. The next slide talks about what sort of layers are necessary to drive this digital quality transformation. We talked about the demand signals from the ecosystem, whether it is federal rulemaking or the move towards value-based care. But there is also there was a question around standardization and making sure that there is less variability, even if we go to standards. There are 3 layers where we want to make sure that we have the right enablers for quality applications, innovative quality applications, whether they are products from NCQA or other quality products that deliver on specific quality-based use cases. The base layer is data, as anyone would expect. The data layer is the most important one, and you might have heard of Cures Act supporting U.S. core under the G10 requirement, G10 section of the Cures Act requirement, or the Patient Access API recommending the implementation of Karen Blue Button IG implementation guide, or Karen Blue Button FHIR profiles to satisfy the Patient Access API data requirements. Now, all of these implementation guides are the standards that look at reducing the variability even after going to those, to the FHIR standard. These implementation guides identify the specific interactions, specific terminologies, specific data elements that are in play to satisfy the mandate. And we use the same standardization to drive the move to digital quality. Use the same reduction of variability to drive the digitalization of quality. So the sources of data, they range from EHRs, claims adjudication systems, HIEs, data aggregators out there, immunization registries, and so forth. And the belief is that as we move towards digital quality measurement, we will leverage existing or perhaps new implementation guides that would help standardize the how these sources of data expose data. We have a initiative at NCQA that kind of looks at the source of data layer and it looks at how the data standardizations can fuel quality measurement, and that's the Bulk FHIR Quality Coalition. The basic coalition objective is how can we harness the regulated APIs. No APIs need to be, new APIs need to be implemented, by the way. Regulated APIs that should already exist and I'm talking about the G10 API at a provider system that is ONC certified, right? The EHR that is ONC certified. Those APIs, as well as the APIs that are stood up by payers to satisfy the patient access API. Again, no new API needs to be implemented. These are already APIs that the payer or payers have implemented as part of the CMS patient access API. How can we harness these APIs to for digital quality measurement? And by that I mean when NCQA digitalized their HEDIS, HEDIS measures, what we have done is we have created a FHIR data model for all of our HEDIS measures. We've written our HEDIS measure logic in CQL, and we have defined a FHIR data model for all of these HEDIS measures. And that FHIR data model, as you will know, HEDIS measures consume claims data as well as clinical data. That FHIR data model is aligned with both the payer, patient access API data model and the G10 clinical, data model, basically the US core. And so what we have done to further reduce the variability is to align with established regulated floors that exist today and not tomorrow or later, but that exist today. And so we are aligned in terms of our FHIR data requirements for our quality measures with the current regulated floors. And what that means is if you are looking at gathering data for a specific HEDIS measure, you should already have access to that data, provided you have the right connection, because those APIs that emit that data should already be in place. And so I think that simplifies, or I think brings down the variability in terms of trying to get data from sources to basically be able to run the measures out there. So this bulk FHIR quality coalition is all about kind of finding dance partners, friendly dance partners, provider and a payer, to create this HEDIS workflow data pipeline consisting of FHIR data, both clinical and administrative, and then pointing this data to HEDIS FHIR profiles that have been created, and getting insights on how this data coming out of these new APIs, how does that look like from a quality perspective? Is the data necessary that for HEDIS measures? Does it have the completeness there that we want to be able to run HEDIS? Does it conform to the HEDIS requirements that are over and above these regulated floors? And there are not that many, but there are some that are HEDIS specific, some constraints, some terminology, requirements. And so the idea is to really look at how these existing regulated APIs can be harnessed for HEDIS digital quality measurement. And so we have a slide that kind of gives more information about that, about the bulk FHIR quality coalition, but I wanted to kind of talk about this lower layer. Moving up to the higher layer, which is called the enablement layer. This layer is all about creating the right infrastructure that leverages the standardized data and delivers consistent, accurate, and harmonized results from a measure logic perspective. And you might expect, does CQL come in here? The CQL, clinical quality language, figure in here? You would be right. This is where CQL standard and the tools that leverage CQL, whether it is CQL engines or CQL to SQL translators or any artifacts that work with CQL, they belong here. And the idea is, can we get a community of CQL engine implementers working together to explore if choice and confidence can be supported in the ecosystem? Very much like the choice and confidence you have in terms of picking up a calculator, right, to satisfy your calculation requirements, whether you're trying to calculate a simple equation or if you're trying to calculate a statistical a requirement from a statistical course perspective. You have that choice and confidence in terms of picking any calculator that's out there for your requirements, and you're confident that it will deliver a consistent result based on your requirements. And so that's the choice and confidence that we want to have when it comes to these implementers of the CQL language. And the digital quality implementers community is basically initiated to address that. So part of the work that the community does is to mature the CQL language, obviously, and help the digital quality implementers or the CQL implementers test their implementations by adding to the test scripts of the CQL language to make sure that we address edge cases or cases where there is ambiguity in the execution. And so that's what the community is kind of focused on in terms of maturing this middle enablement layer of SQL or clinical reasoning specification and tools. And we'll have a slide that kind of allows you to kind of get more information about that further down. Are there any questions? I
Yeah,
see a lot
yeah,
of
actually,
yes,
Amal,
should be
there
a good
are a
time.
couple.
Yes.
And so I'm gonna start. If you don't mind, I'd also like to take a quick pass at this one after you answer it. How
Sure.
many, so someone asked, how many separate APIs is a health plan expected to connect to in order to fully correctly report HEDIS in the future? Do we need separate connections for each provider group in our network? You mentioned finding dance partners to test now, which sounds like separate connections.
So that's a great question, and it really speaks to scalability, right? And interoperability is all about enabling or fueling that scalability. Um, how you would connect to get at the data sources for your specific requirements, it really depends on your organization's maturity and the capability, I guess. But in my mind, the simplest way to kind of scale your connections so you get access to all those interoperable data points is through a network. And it could be a local HIE, Health Information Exchange, or a Health Information Network. It could be a TEFCA QHIN. But the idea is you leverage a network that allows you that standardized infrastructure, that standardized connection to the API sources, the standardized API sources that you're trying to get data from. And so that's, I think that's the future of scalability in terms of interoperability, in the future. The Bulk Fire Quality Coalition has an inaugural cohort consisting of Cambia, multi-care connected care system out of the Pacific Northwest. And the connection between the two is facilitated by the eHealth Exchange Qualified Health Information Network, which is a TEFCA QHIN. And what this model or this cohort kind of represents is the ways for Cambia to access data beyond multi-care if for example their member the member population kind of goes outside multi-care to get care out for perhaps colorectal screening or flu shots, being able to access that clinical data after you've gotten a claim for that, looking at claims as a record locator of sorts, leveraging the network to access those data sources, given that that those data sources will have that data for their member is an excellent strategy in terms of kind of scaling your data requirements across multiple source systems. There's also a similar strategy for providers being able to support their multi-payer strategy, right? And so there's a lot of ways you can do this. Big systems, health systems or big payers, might want to kind of go have the multiple connections themselves because they can scale them and manage them at their as part of their capability. But like I said, it really depends on your enterprise's capability and priorities in terms of how you see, being able to scale access to these data sources. And if you're thinking of, creating a cohort or forming a cohort, um, I'm happy to kind of work with you to identify if there is a pattern that would be useful, whether it is to a local HIE or a TEFCA QHIN, where we could kind of bridge the gaps or cover the data misses or data gaps.
Yep. And if I could just quickly add, for those of you who may not be familiar with MHGC, we're in the process of standing up FHIR services for our NEHAN exchange service, and we are explicitly supporting both prior authorization and quality measures use cases over FHIR. And that is a connect once, exchange with all type connection for everyone that's on the network. So to Amal's point, there are multiple different ways to do that, and we are offering one of them hopefully soon. There was another question, which was from Chris, and he wanted you to elaborate on how APIs can be restricted to not allow full access to the chart and instead only those resources that are applicable to a measure. He thinks there's a lot of misunderstanding around the support for this and fear that providers are making entire charts exposed. And Amal, if you're talking now, we don't hear you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, I muted myself because I didn't want you to hear my coughing. I'm kind of recovering from a cold.
Oh,
Apologies for
no
that.
worries.
Could you reiterate that question, please, one more time for
Yep,
me?
sure. So hang on, I have another one in after. So can you elaborate on how FHIR APIs can be restricted to not allow full access to a patient's chart and
Ah,
instead only the resources that are applicable to a particular measure? He thinks there's a lot of misunderstanding and fear that providers might be opening up every piece of data they have if they do any exchange.
that's a great question, and I think that kind of boils down to um, going above and beyond, possibly, than our data exchanges being used to support use cases that are beyond the focus. Um, I think there needs to be governance around that. I 100% agree. And so what we have done for starters is, from a HEDIS perspective, at least, what we have done is to align our fire data model and our HEDIS requirements, HEDIS measure requirements with the current regulated standards. What that means is that the regulated standards require that certain data be exposed, whether it is US CDI version 1, which is the current floor, um, or if it is the CPCDS, Common Paired Consumer Data Set, which is the data element set that is exposed by the Karen Blue Button, claims API. And so by doing that, you kind of eliminate the questions around, hey, am I getting more data than, or am I getting less data than what I really need, on the consumer side, and on the producer side, you're not worrying about, am I exposing more data than necessary? Those concerns can be reasonably addressed. Obviously, there is um, performance considerations as well, in terms of, hey, even if you have access to regulated data, even if the providers and the producers and the consumers, agree on the exchange of regulated data, and there is less concerns about, are you exposing more or less? So that concern is kind of addressed, but there is still concern about the performance of those APIs. If by exposing, especially around the bulk or population level data exchanges, am I um, adversely affecting the functioning of my system if uh, if I try to support the bulk or population queries for some of these consumers. So there's a performance aspect also that you need to think about, not just the access aspect. Um, these are the things that we are talking about, we are discussing as part of our bulk fire coalition. Once we have the data sharing agreement established, how are we looking at making the bulk APIs performant? Can we use specific parameters and as part of our queries to make our data access more performant? And I'm talking about parameters like since, because you don't want to, when you retrieve data, you only want to retrieve the data that has been updated, past your, last retrieval. And so how do we use the since parameter to get only the delta from the producer? And so we're exploring all of that as part of the bulk fire coalition. And the I think the good thing with the coalition is that we have federal observers that are, part of the coalition looking at guidance or data points, real world testing data points that we can give them to further refine and perhaps tweak their roadmap, whether it is USCDI roadmap or perhaps giving more guidelines around the bulk fire SLAs, if you will, or performance guidelines around those same bulk APIs. And so we're talking about all of that as part of our bulk fire coalition. There's also a 10 by 10 coalition introduced by ASTP, several months ago that is, looking at, from a different perspective, the same problems. What are some of the issues or gaps that exist beyond the regulations? Because remember, federal government is not in the business of doing real world testing. It depends on the ecosystem, the industry, the environment to do that real world testing and give it the feedback on what works, what doesn't, and what are some of the ways to address those gaps, if that makes sense. Any other questions? All right.
Nope, we're good for now.
So just to kind of wrap up this, this kind of shows the timeline for our HEDIS measures, digitalized HEDIS measures, and how our fire guide, consisting of HEDIS profiles, kind of marches along with those uh, release timelines. We plan to support um, not just uh, the current HEDIS measures as we convert them to digital, but all our future new HEDIS measures would have automatic support in our fire implementation guides, obviously. And so we're 100% aligned with the DQM direction that CMS and ONC or ASTP has, which basically means aligning with CQL and aligning with FIRE as the input and output data models for those measures. These are the slides that kind of, talk about more details about the couple of initiatives that are run at NCQA. The digital quality implementers community, which I mentioned, kind of is targeted towards the middle enablement layer, CQL specification and CQL or clinical reasoning tools, whether it is CQL engines doing HEDIS or non-HEDIS measures, or SQL to SQL transformers and tools like that. The idea is to create choice and confidence as far as those artifacts in the industry to promote the applications on the top layer. There's a QR code for folks who'd like to get more information or perhaps get involved.
Amal, before you move on,
Yeah.
I know we're almost out of time, but could you just really quickly address whether the CQL here is really similar to the CQL that's currently being leveraged for a lot of the prior auth work, and how, if maybe you can leverage each other? Your thoughts on that?
That's a great question. Yes, 1,000 times yes. because the CQL specification that this community is trying to influence towards more maturation is going to benefit all manifestations of the CQL specification, whether it is CQL to represent the quality logic or the CQL that represents the clinical data retrieval logic in the DTR part of the prior authorization sequence, the document templates and reports, where you actually collect data for, clinical data for medical necessity and substantiation, and for creating the prior authorization request. And so, yes, this is something that should fuel standardization, harmonization, and promote, or rather disambiguate the implementation of the logic using CQL in a variety of scenarios, ranging from digital quality measurement or prior authorization data retrieval. So
Excellent. Thank you.
just to kind of add to that, I would encourage folks that are, because I see that as an enablement layer component as well. Prior authorization CQL. I guess I should update the slide. But if folks are interested to look at how CQL can be leveraged for prior authorization workflows, this would be an awesome way to get that perspective in and help mature the CQL specification. So the second initiative that I run at NCQA is the Bulk Fire Quality Coalition. We basically are inviting, dance partners, friendly dance partners, provider and payer, payers out there to form cohorts to really drive the development and governance and maturation of the bulk fire and data quality concerns. Whether you're looking at enabling the bulk fire APIs for your use case, or if you're trying to look at how the data that you have in fire, how does that evaluate from a data quality perspective in order to run these HEDIS measures. We cover all of that as part of the data quality, as part of the bulk fire quality coalition, because I think the fundamental requirement for running any kind of use case, whether it is HEDIS measurement or even prior authorization, you need good quality data. And I think a good way to think of us would be to think of it as a snowplow, where if a piece of data or a bundle of data is good for HEDIS, it is probably good for other use cases. I mean, that's the view that I have. But we cover the data quality aspect also in as part of the bulk fire quality coalition. And the last slide that I have is really around the digital quality online community that we have. If you'd like to get involved in discussions and sharing your experience, or getting insights on how organizations are looking at digital quality or approaching digital quality, target, I think this is a great way to kind of get involved and get some feedback, or even give us some feedback around that.
So we're just about out of time. Good timing, Amal. We did have one last question about how NCQA and MHGC are working together, and I just want to let folks know that we do work together. We do talk to each other and have conversations about how we can work together to advance quality measures for everyone. And with that, I'm going to thank Amal for his time, and thank all of you for your time. I hope you got a lot out of it. Feel free to email me at dgc@myhealthdata.org, or use the contact info that Amal had on his slides for NCQA. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.